Well, hello and welcome to this week's campaign catch-up. Dan Andros here, joined by CBN's David Brody and John Stolnis. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. We're going to get right into it. David, you had two key interviews that are coming up. We're going to play in full. You're going to see clips of these in the next day or so, and then the full interviews will follow that. But let's talk about those, starting with Lara Trump. She had some interesting things to say.
She did. We specifically talked about the get out the vote effort and then election integrity. And when we got to election integrity, I asked her, what keeps you up at night? How confident are you that we're not going to see, election lawsuits left and right after November 5th all the way into December? In other words, this is going to be a drawn out legal battle. We're not going to know the results on election night. She says, I'm totally confident that that's not going to happen. And she went on to say that she believes that it's going to be an early night. And she believes that, in essence, it's going to be a blowout. And I say in essence because I followed up and I said, so you're saying 315 to 320 electoral votes? And she said, yes. They believe there's going to be no drama on Tuesday night, that he's going to sweep. That would mean he'd have to sweep the Sun Belt and the Rust Belt. And if that's the case, tighten your belt, because that's crazy. I mean, when I say crazy, I don't mean crazy like a prediction, but though I guess some would say it's a crazy prediction. Well, that would be wild to see that in a race that has been so laser tight, at least according to the polls. So that's kind of part of what she said. The other part, what's really interesting here, is that she talked about the humanizing of Donald Trump. I actually brought that up to her. I said, look, we've been seeing a lot more ads and a lot more social media videos about Grandpa Trump and, the kids at the rallies and everything. We didn't really see that in 2016 at all, in 2020 at all. But this time we are. And she admitted, they're putting that out there a little bit more. He's not the biggest fan of that. He understands, I guess, in essence, that some people want to do that. Some people want to bring that side out of him. But she admitted that he doesn't really like it because, she didn't say he has a brand to protect, but, it's about, for him, it's about strength. And he doesn't want to show any kind of softness, but that's what people like anyhow. So anyhow, There's all that going on in the interview. It's pretty interesting. And then Chris Coons, Senator Chris Coons, why he's important. He's the co-chair of the Harris-Walz campaign, one of the co-chairs. And he talked about interesting aspects of Kamala Harris and her faith, which will air later on the 700 Club in a few weeks. But specifically, he talked about that she needs to have more specifics on policy, that she needs to do a press conference, she needs to do more interviews. And that's what he's encouraging her to do.
Yeah, that is super interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing the full interviews. And going back to that Trump, the softness thing, because I've heard a few stories. They kind of creep out every now and then over the years, where he helps somebody in need that he just happened upon. I think I remember one of he came across somebody whose car had broken down, and I forget what he did, like bought him a car. I did something overly nice, and then but you could tell he kind of didn't really want that to be the spotlight, which is super interesting to me because. As a guy who is, his opponents are essentially trying to say that he's, evil incarnate, essentially. These are the sorts of things you'd think you'd want to put out there. And especially if it's authentic, right? And that's just kind of what he does, which they don't put him out there that much. So we don't really know. But that, I've heard those anecdotes.
Well, I've known him for 15 years or so, and we've done about 30 plus interviews, and I've seen him in private settings quite a few times. I don't typically talk about this story. I'll be brief. But I had dinner, actually my wife and I had dinner with Melania and Donald Trump. This was in 2015, about 3 months after he announced for president. And I saw a much different side of him. Specifically, he asked me, first question he asked me, he said, I have a question for you. I said, what's that? He goes, how's your marriage? Is what he asked me. And, I said, no, how's your marriage? No, I didn't really say that, but I said, it's fine. I said, why? He goes, well, because, in the past I've really messed up. I really messed up my marriages. I became a workaholic. I didn't put the required attention into a marriage, and I don't want you to make that same mistake. And it's like, wait, what? This is Donald Trump? It kind of blows your mind. And anyhow, the whole dinner actually blew our mind because I got to tell you, it was like this really Tony small restaurant in the middle of New York. And there were all these famous people. I kept coming up to this table. It was weird. I felt like I was being punked. I kid you not. It was like Andrew Lloyd Webber from all the Broadway shows came up, Bernadette Peters, Michael J. Fox, Michael Caine. All these people are coming up to the table. I'm like, what is going on here? And then finally Trump leans into me and says, David, don't look behind you, is what he says. Like a young child. I don't mean that he's a young child, obviously, but kind of, David, don't look behind you. I go, why? What's going on? He goes, you're never going to guess who's behind you. I'm like, I don't know who. He goes, Oprah. And indeed, Oprah Winfrey was sitting at the table literally 7 feet behind me. I had no idea at the time. So Oprah came over to the table, and Oprah and Donald gave each other a big hug. Melania and Oprah were kissing, really hugging and everything. So the point is that is a side of not only Donald Trump, but like the media wants to talk about, Oprah and Donald Trump. They used to be chummy, and I saw it was right in front of my eyes. There was Oprah at our table talking to Donald Trump. So this is the type of stuff that, like I said, I don't talk about it often, but I think in this kind of provided the context to do it in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting, John. I mean, as we're getting in the home stretch here, and that's, trying to paint the picture of your opponent. And, it's just not something you see that much. And, we'll see, I guess, if more comes out. But your reaction to all of that, what David just went through with both those interviews.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in the Trump, saga going back to 2016, this tale of this man who we all knew, the country knew who Donald Trump was even before he ran for president. And obviously his Q rating was so much higher at that time, coming off of The Apprentice. He was generally, I think, seen largely positively by most Americans, because on that show he was entertaining. He was funny. He was relatable. It was a quality show. I mean, he was generally seen in a positive light. And now, of course, since 2016, since he became president, and of course, politics being what it is, that has certainly done a 180 for many people. Not everyone, but for many Americans. And I think the idea here, if you're just strictly looking at this from a campaign perspective, is I think Lara Trump is right. If you're folks in Pennsylvania who are still like unreached, you're not sure exactly what you're going to do just yet, and you've been told that Donald Trump is someone that you should fear. Well, if you see pictures of him as a grandfather doing kind things for people, maybe that helps. So just from a political standpoint, showing that side of him makes a whole lot of sense. It's not going to change the minds of people who are never Trumpers, who are dead set against Donald Trump. And I don't know if it's able to combat all of the media, the ads that are out there that are going to portray him one way or the other. And same thing goes for Kamala Harris, right? I mean, you can show all these different sides of a candidate that you want. There are going to be those other sides being shown on media to fight them. But I think it's smart for the RNC. I think it's smart for Lara Trump to try to humanize someone who, again, during this political process, both of these candidates get dehumanized by the other side.
Yeah, and the numbers, John, real quick, because I know you've been following these really closely. And is this just sort of typical? My candidate, I think he's going to win. Or do you think maybe there's something they're actually seeing that they're going to get to that number that David was talking about, 315, 320, something like that?
Well, obviously, I mean, you look in all these battleground states, it's still just neck and neck in just about every single one of them. You look at one poll and somebody's up by 1, and then in another poll, somebody's up by 2 in the same state, and then they're tied. I mean, it's seesawing back and forth. They're right on the precipice on basically every one of these battleground states. There's a couple exceptions here and there. I saw a poll out I forget who it was, that had Trump up by just 2 in Florida. I mean, some of these polls you just kind of have to throw out if they're real outliers here. But generally speaking, if let's say Donald Trump or Kamala Harris comes out on the winning end of these 1.2 point victories in most of these states, then yes, you can pile up the electoral college numbers and make it look like a blowout from the electoral college standpoint. But in terms of the actual vote in these different battleground states, the numbers it's a closer election than it might feel when you look at it at the end of the day. So kind of a couple of different ways of looking at it. And depending on how long it takes to count these votes up, if the states are as close as they seem to be, I disagree. I don't think that it's going to be something that we're able to easily call on election night, but we'll see.
Real quick, can I say a couple things on the numbers?
Sure can.
Remember the plus or minus margin of error is very important here, because, we always talk about this being a close race, 1 point, 2 points, whatever. But then you put the plus or minus margin of error in, and if the polls are allowing for this, because remember, it's not just methodology, but sample size, and there's just a lot of different things going on here. So here's the bottom line. You could have, whether it be a Kamala Harris or a Donald Trump, you could have them winning a state by 8 points. This might not be 1 or 2. I mean, this could be 6 or 8. either way. So it could actually be bigger than people think. That's one important point to make. Also, CNN just came out with some new polling, which is really interesting. You know, the trade worker. We're not talking about the union worker, which, by the way, Kamala Harris is underperforming with union workers as it compares to Biden from 4 years ago. But trade workers, ones that don't go to that go to trade school, that don't go to college, Bill Clinton won those voters by 7 points back in the 90s. Donald Trump is winning that vote now by 31 points. So if you think about that, where we have come from, the Democrats winning that trade labor vote, if you will, 7 points in the 90s, now Trump's up 31. That's a huge shift. So these are the type of things that I think are going to be interesting to watch on election night, the blue collar vote. And of course, if that's the case, watch out in the Rust Belt states, and especially also Nevada as well.
All right, another thing that's going to be interesting to watch here, guys, we got the vice presidential debate tomorrow night happening. We got J.D. Vance, Tim Walz, and there's already been some barbs going back and forth about that from Trump and others. So look, who do we expect to come out on top of this thing, and how much weight does the VP debate typically carry?
John?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I don't. That's okay. I mean, I don't think anybody has ever remembered a vice presidential debate. I mean, there may have been a couple of moments here and there. I seem to remember maybe there was a viral moment in the Dan Quayle vice presidential debate. Yeah. And I don't remember exactly what it was, but that's the point. You know, I mean, nobody remembers really anything that was said. I mean, obviously in the Kamala Harris vice presidential debate last time around, she had the, can I finish or whatever it was that she said in that one. But that was, again, that didn't win the election for Joe Biden. And it would take a lot, I think, for J.D. Vance or Tim Walz to really steer this election one way or the other in order for it to really land. I mean, I think it's interesting. I think maybe we might actually get more of a policy discussion with the vice presidents than we got with the presidential candidates. There might be a little bit less personal attacks going back and forth between these two guys who are both experienced lawmakers. I mean, J.D. Vance, obviously in the Senate, doesn't have a long legislative career, but Tim Walz in the House for a number of years too as governor of Minnesota. I think there'll be a civilized tone. But I expect this to really focus on a lot of policy, and the rules are going to be different. It's going to be the microphones will be hot for the entire debate, although the moderators will have the option to mute them at their discretion. And it will certainly be interesting. I think that's one of the things, David, we're going to be looking at most closely is how do the moderators interact with the two candidates here, right? Will they just be calling balls and strikes, setting up the questions, letting the candidates do the fact checking, or are they going to jump in like we saw at the last debate?
Well, and especially, sorry, David, real quick, but especially I wonder if this will be kind of an opportunity for Trump Vance to sort of point out what the moderators did last time. So if they do jump in, I would highly expect J.D. Vance not to let that go by without being noticed. One thing I wanted to tee you up with here, David, is the thing I keep seeing is people are saying, well, Tim Walz says that this guy has a temper, so expect J.D. Vance to try to get under his skin a little bit. Kind of similarly to how Kamala tried to get under Trump's skin with the crowd size and all that. So what do you see happening here?
All right, so there are a few different things to address here. Number one, there's already a story out about Tim Walz being, in essence, fearful of debating J.D. Vance, which you wonder is definitely a plant story. In other words, that's a lower expectation situation there. I mean, that's politics 101. The mics will be muted. Excuse me. The mics will be hot, which means my popcorn in my lap's going to be hot. Because this is going to be fun. I mean, just from a pure, UFC pay-per-view standpoint, that's going to be fun. Now, here's the thing. CBS has already come out and they have said that they are not going to fact check. So that's great. That's perfect. That's exactly what they should do. In other words, put on your big boy pants, Tim Walz, put on your big boy pants, J.D. Vance. And if you want to fact check each other, you do it in real time. You're running for, in essence, president, vice president, you're running on the ticket. So you can fact check each other. I think what CBS is doing here is absolutely right. Why do they need to fact check? They don't need to fact check. They should stay out of it. It's between those two guys. Let the mics go and let them have at it. And we'll get a much more granular and more authentic, I believe, view of it all. Last thing I would point out real quick is that I think the challenge here is for J.D. Vance. Here's the thing. If Tim Walz wants to basically say that J.D. Vance is weird and the cats and dogs stuff come up and Trump's weird and all that, because all that's going to come up, who cares? Everybody already has an opinion about Trump. I think that train, I know that train's left the station. So there's really no ceiling floor there. It's just cement at this point. Everybody knows. The challenge for J.D. Vance here is there's a plethora of liberal information about Tim Walz. I mean, tons of stuff that he could go after about Tim Walz did this in Minnesota. Tim Walz did that in Minnesota, X, Y, and Z. That won't help the Trump campaign at all. What he needs to do is be able to tie that to Kamala Harris. He needs to be able to say, Tim Walz, you did this in Minnesota. And then he needs to remind the audience or viewers out there that Kamala Harris picked this man. Tim Walz, you're for whatever you want to X, Y, and Z on abortion. Tim Walz, you're for X, Y, and Z on transgender surgery. And Kamala Harris was the one who picked Tim Walz. Americans remember that. Listen, it does not matter if he criticizes Tim Walz about all his Minnesota policies. Who gives a what? Who cares? It's about that he ties it to Kamala Harris. I think the more the name of Kamala Harris comes out of J.D. Vance's mouth on Tuesday night in New York, the better the Trump campaign will be. If it's all about Tim Walz and his record, no one's going to care. It won't matter. Got to tie it.
And I wonder if the same is true in reverse, right? I mean,
I don't think it is. And that's my point. I mean, you tell me, John. Dan, I don't think I thought about that. I don't think it's true in reverse, because if you're going to try to tie Trump to this weird narrative or this, you two are crazy talking about cats and dogs, I don't think it matters, because people already think Trump's either weird if they think he's weird, or in other words, he's been around too long for people to have a different opinion. You're not going to change people's opinion about Trump, but I think you can change people's opinion about Kamala Harris. I think that's the difference.
No, I think that's fair. And I see what you're saying about that. And I just feel like the smart move for the Kamala Harris campaign and for Governor Walz here is to continue to go after Donald Trump, right? Because again, they're not going to score a lot of points by knocking J.D. Vance down a few pegs. J.D. Vance isn't running for president. And that was kind of what I meant. Like, these vice presidential debates, they're proxy wars, right? You're not fighting you're not trying to defeat J.D. Vance. He's on the ticket, but Donald Trump is the guy that people are voting for. People are voting for Kamala Harris, not necessarily Governor Walz, at least here in 2024. So your goal is to continue to, these proxies are being used to attack the leaders on each side. And that was kind of mostly my point, was that I think we're going to hear a lot of Trump's name and we're going to hear a lot of Harris's name at this debate on Tuesday night.
All right. Well, it'll certainly be interesting to watch it unfold and see how that plays out. Obviously, we're all going to be tuning in, and a lot of other folks will be tuning in as well. All right, another thing I wanted to get to here, guys. Democrats, ramping up the spending, John, and it was about even in August, and now it looks like Democrats really kind of doubled down on some ad spends here in some key states. So, is this? I mean, obviously we know what they're trying to do, but is this too little, too late, or what do you think the effect of this will be?
I mean, I think there's a reason they do it. There's a reason that raising money is the number one thing in campaigning, because you got to spend that money on the ads. And I know people where you are in Pennsylvania, Dan, and Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, Nevada, all those folks are just swimming. They're up to their eyeballs in these political ads. And in September, Democrats spent just under $293 million on ads in those 7 key swing states I just mentioned. Republicans spent $156.5 million. If I'm doing the math real quick in my head, that's about $35.5 million difference in the month of September alone. And the Harris campaign has had an edge in fundraising ever since she got into the race. National advertising in other states, $696 million for Harris, $438 million for Donald Trump. That's from July 22nd to September 30th. So, I mean, that's just the Harris campaign. You're going to see more of her stuff out there, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on other social medias, whether it's on cable, whether it's on network news, during football games, during the baseball playoffs that are coming up. it's just a matter of, I don't know at this point, if people have made up enough of their minds about each of these candidates, how much influence they're going to have, but that's where the money's going.
I'm glad you brought up social media, because at first we were talking about television ads and battleground states, which are important. Don't get me wrong, but we know the deal. Everybody's streaming now, and not only streaming, but they're on YouTube and other places when you just watch a video. And I got to tell you, just from my personal experience, I don't know about you guys, but I play a YouTube video. You know who pops up first? Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris pops up first. Does Trump pop up once in a while? Maybe out of like 10 YouTube clicks, maybe 1 out of 10. Most of it's Kamala Harris or something else entirely. But so let's also remember there's micro-targeting. And when I talk about micro-targeting, there's this, in essence, micro-targeting on streaming services. That's the new terrain now. So, you go to Hulu or Netflix or this or that. Oh, I don't know about Netflix, actually, because I don't think they have advertising in Netflix. But in Hulu and others, they do. And they will be able to tell if you are, let's say, a Christian conservative household, a conservative Christian household. They'll be able to get into your streaming accounts, if you will, and be able to target you with network or with campaign ads. And same thing if you're a liberal household. So this is kind of the new terrain. So it's everywhere. It's not just in battleground states, because this just in, people in battleground states stream. And, if they're not watching, ABC with the UHF antennas and bunny ears, they're actually sitting around watching Hulu. That's where they're going to find those people as well.
Yeah. And, I'm in Bucks County, Pennsylvania here. And actually JD Vance over the weekend was in Newtown, Pennsylvania, which is not far from where I'm at. So they obviously are targeting this area. One last thing, guys, that I want to get your take on, because this is a phenomenon that I just simply do not understand. And that is yard signs. Why? I would love to find the American who has made their selection based on the last yard sign they saw as they were going through and said, Waltz, Trump, wait, there's another Waltz, there's a Trump. Hey, who does this?
Here's my take.
I'll give you my one take is the only thing it's good for is to make you aware that there's actually an election coming up. But that's it. That's my only thought. Sorry if I stole your thunder there. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, I don't think the yard signs are to try to encourage people to vote. I think they're a declaration. That is a flag you're planting on the ground. We are a Trump household, or we are a Harris household. And more largely to the point, this is a Republican household, or this is a Democrat household, or these are the things that this house stands for, this family stands for, this group stands for. But I will say the other thing too, and not even so much for Trump and for Vance, but when you're talking about some of the people like in the local elections, when you go, if you don't know much about the names, but you go to the ballot box and you see for county commissioner or somebody else like this, the name you've been seeing all around town, they're suddenly on your ballot. If you're not someone who just does pull the lever for one party, you absolutely can be influenced into filling that circle for the person whose signs you've seen the most.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with John. I agree with Dan. I agree with both of you. That's really all my input. But can I just say, can I bring up one topic real quick?
Yeah, for sure.
Real quick. Did you guys see Saturday Night Live over the weekend? I don't know if you saw any of it.
I did not.
I have not, other than a clip here and there, I've not seen Saturday Night Live in years.
Well, listen. I checked out on Saturday Night Live years ago. I mean, it just got ridiculous. This weekend was phenomenal. It was so good. They finally brought balance back, and they actually got on the Democrats and Trump. That's what we want. We want equal opportunity defending. Yeah. And
100%.
That was fantastic. Guys, please, everybody out there in YouTube land, go check it out. It's hilarious. Dana Carvey comes back as President Joe Biden. It is the funniest thing. I mean, I got to tell you.
That's a good point, though, because even with SNL and I mean, particularly with the late night shows like the Colberts of the world, like they have really turned into just political, and it's very one-sided political talk shows. It's just who wants that? Like, I mean, if you're going to just be funny. I thought those guys were supposed to be funny first, and they look for the funny in all of like all politics, like you just said, should be on the table for comedians, and they should have fun at both sides' expense. But they don't seem to do that anymore.
Dana Carvey was unbelievable. The way he did Biden's mannerisms, you've got to check him out. Also, Maya Rudolph as Kamala Harris. She's done Kamala Harris before. She was phenomenal. Just really, really good. That the voice was perfect. But the one that may have stolen, you got to check this out. The one that may have stolen the show is the comedian Jim Gaffigan, who played
I love Jim Gaffigan.
Walls. Have you seen that?
I have not, but
No.
but that sounds like a great match. I do love Jim Gaffigan. He's very, very funny. Actually, I mean, one quick anecdote on Jim Gaffigan, and then we can get out of here. But I had heart surgery a few years ago, and in recovery, like, you know, the open heart, so like my chest, it was really hurt, right? And I was just, I'm like, I was bored, you know, I was sitting in bed all day, so I'm like, I'm watching some Jim Gaffigan, and I was laughing so hard that it actually hurt. And so I actually tweeted that, and he responded to it, which I was like, oh, great, that's really cool. But anyway, yeah, really, really funny guy. So now I've got my homework. I'm gonna go check out these clips.
Same.
So, gentlemen, appreciate it. All right,
Thanks.
awesome. David Brody, John Stolnis, appreciate it, guys. We'll see you next time.
See ya.
See you then.